If you can do code generation, you can do malicious code generation, right? And just like other nation states and hackers are going to use every other tool out there, if they write code, they're going to write code with AI tooling.
Sarah, I am so excited for this. We just looked beforehand. It was the 25th of January, 2017, when we last did the first show. So thank you so much for joining me today after an incredible 6 years.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Harry. You were 20, which is amazing, and the episode was why conversational will be the next big thing, which is, I think, like a shade early.
It's slightly a shade early. The importance of market timing has never been more prescient. But the most exciting thing is you've started a new fund recently with Conviction. And so I want to start on this. I obviously spoke to many friends and mutual friends before, and many of them said that I had to start on this. So why did you decide to leave Greylock first?
Yeah, Greylock is like this, we have many mutual friends there, some of my dearest. It's a 7-year-old platform with extraordinary history and people. And like, I played for the team for 10 years, right? So amazing place, super grateful for the opportunity, like lots of mentors there. Anil Bustary, Ashim Chana, Reid Hoffman, David Z, Jerry Chen. I love the people. I really wanted to focus on early stage investing. 0 to 1 is just magic. Right. And I wanted to be an entrepreneur. Again, you can't rationalize that, right? It's a great job being a GP at a big VC firm. It's crazy to leave. But I wanted to operate differently. I had a few ideas for how a small team could do venture, how you could change the founder experience. And the biggest thing was believing that AI is a breaking change.
It is a great fucking job being a GP. This is what I've learned, like, starting a fund. You don't have to do any of the shit behind the scenes. Like, being a fund manager and being, like, a GP are very different things. Has there been anything surprising for you making the switch from GP at the hailed fund to being fund manager and founder?
Yeah, I have a lot more existential dread than I used to. So that's one thing. But as you said, like also, a fund is a business like any other, right? Like I run Rippling payroll now. Like we have an office, like the sort of administration and, we have 2 sets of customers, entrepreneurs and LPs. You think about strategy for your business, you do recruiting. We were just talking about that. And so like there is, I did recruiting at Greylock too, but it's not a job, right?
Yeah, I always used to look at GPs at big funds and was like, oh, why didn't you start your own? And now I have my own. I'm like, I get it. You should stay
But
at
it's so much fun.
It is so much fun. I agree with you. They told me that running a media company and a fund at the same time would be a good idea. They lied.
No one told you that, Harry. You're the only person who's like, yes, that's fine. I have 40,000 hours in the week.
Yeah, no, you're right, actually. That was me. But I want to... Okay, so we mentioned Conviction there. We mentioned kind of the AI focus. What's the thesis with Conviction? And why did you decide to kind of bet the farm on this single thesis?
So AI is the biggest value creation opportunity in our lifetimes. Like I'm quite confident that we're going to have 10 and 20 person teams building billion-dollar businesses. And if we at Conviction can be central in this community, and it's not like a blip on the radar, it's decades of change and we deeply understand it and become best in the world at identifying, great companies and partnering with the founders, building those companies, like I think it's an important opportunity.
I mean, I think that's a very compelling stance. You said how's like the style changed? It's changed because I used to like stick to schedule. Now I don't. I'm really worried about wealth inequality. I think it's never been worse.
Yeah.
And when we think about like teams of 10 and 20 building these billion-dollar companies, I agree with you totally. I'm just worried that we're going to see this centralization of wealth with the evolution of AI and becoming more and more prominent in technology and society. Do you agree? And am I right to be worried?
I do agree with you. Right. I think that's a controversial. Maybe people don't want to say that out loud, but I would agree with you and then also say technology, it drives abundance. Right. If that's anything from agricultural revolution, industrial revolution, computing, like I think we will produce more. And the question is, like, do we want more if it is going to begin by being distributed very unequally? My answer is yes. Like, you give people these technologies, and rarely are people, do they say take it away? Like, I'm going to stop using it. Right? I think the productivity benefit is incredible. That's possible. And that doesn't mean like we as a society and on the policy side and in a very democratic way need to address that distribution. But I think like it doesn't mean to me like don't make progress.
No, I totally agree, and I think you're already seeing kind of the consumerization where so many people rely on ChatGPT and the interface there that actually, as you said, they'd be very upset if you took it away. The thing that worries me, though, is like regulatory bodies. Again, diving straight in, like, and things never seen such a big chasm between regulatory body knowledge and like the actual technology itself. This worries me that they're not in a position to actually regulate with domain knowledge. Do you share my concern?
Yeah, I think it is a concern. I don't think it is structurally different than other areas of technology, right? So if you have the internet, you have cybersecurity issues. And so I've been a long time cybersecurity investor. I've engaged with national security bodies on policy making in this area. And I'm spending time in DC 2 weeks from now on thinking about AI risk as well. And so I think the thing that is different today may be the speed of change, right? Like, I don't think we have decades to adjust to these capabilities in society. And so I think it's incumbent on anybody producing the technology, enabling the technology to go like partner with policymakers and the rest of society and like do that education, as you said. And like, we got to build a new muscle here. I think it's important.
I totally agree in terms of building that new muscle and kind of partnering with them. In terms of the fun thesis, I kind of think back to like when we had the iPhone come out, or when, Kleiner did the climate change fund, I think it was, or the green energy fund, or whatever that fund was, which...
Oh my gosh, yeah, hope it's
we all
not
know how that
though.
did. I'm not saying this will go the same, Sarah, you're brilliant, I think the world of you. But my point is, like, I view this as like an enabling technology which everything will be built on top of. I had Navan founder Ariel on, and like, Trip Actions or Navan is now using it. Everyone is like sitting on top of it. Why have a vertically centric AI fund?
You're asking me to like give away the kind of hidden secret of the fund, right? So here it is though. If like all this is execution anyway. Like if we at Conviction are right in the long term, and this is the most important technology change of the decade, and we're good at selection and execution, and we invest in this outsized number of important tech companies, again, it just means that they will be the most important companies, period, right? And so like, yes, like, you're right. Like, I think it's eventually just a horizontal software fund. But right now, I think it's also useful for us to be specialists, right? Like, the AI community is actually quite limited in size. And so, like, if we are focused on that, we can invest in the community because applied research matters in a way that has never before, right? I think your average venture capitalist does not spend a lot of time in computer science research. And then like, you do a lot of community building. Like, we can be a matchmaker for teams, a sorting hat for people who want to get into AI startups. There's strategic relationships that are very specific to AI, right? People need model access data, GPUs, design partners. And then I think there's like a new set of understanding and tribal knowledge because it's a very technical and dynamic field. Like we're rethinking a lot of user experience in a way that hasn't been true in 2 decades. And I think founders in this field in particular, I think they should want investors who know something about these strategic issues for them. And we're talking about like safety and alignment even, right? And so I think like in the near term, it's more specialized.
Do VCs really have a clue? Like, I'm very transparent. I do not. And I meet with founders and I say, I do not, but I think this is a fucking hard journey. And there's lots of different aspects of building a company beyond the pure technology stack. I can help with them in these ways, and I'm here for you in these ways. And I'm not going to pretend that I'm something else. And that seems to resonate quite well. My point being, do you think most VCs actually get it, or is it kind of BS?
I think like there are different ways to be valuable as an investor and then like different levels of authenticity in the community, right? So I think there's a lot of genuine and justified enthusiasm as well as a lot of like FOMO and pretension, right? But broadly, no, there's not a lot of deep understanding yet. This is a technical and dynamic field, and the research is intersecting with the real world at a pace like I've never before encountered in more than a decade of investing. So like, and then you could ask the question like, is that a good idea, right? And again, different ways to be successful, right? If you're choosing people and founder quality, like maybe you could still do really well even against this type of investment. But buying access to investments without some level of understanding sounds perilous.
I totally agree with you. Can I ask, we've seen so many of these investors and so much of the VC class go absolutely freaking nuts for, obviously, AI. They just, I haven't seen before in a long time. It really, just reminds me that boom
We never
time...
learn.
No, we never learn. Boom time is not over, baby. My question to you is, actually knowing the space, what do you make of the current craziness within AI funding circles?
Yeah, so I think the craziness in a small number of instances gets very amplified by the media, right? And so, yes, there is enthusiasm and less sensitivity to pricing in a certain style of AI company than others in this macro. But maybe 5 companies have come out of the gate raising a huge amount of money, and that's not what most founders understand. Right. But it's those 5 companies that the story gets repeatedly told.
I totally get you. But character AI, okay, you know Josh Buckley, I know Josh Buckley, we speak every night. I'm to him, dude, I don't get it. Can you help me? And he provides some very intellectual advice and thoughts. Is that crazy? Or is that justified?
So I would say Noam is... I just had Noam Shazir on my podcast with Elad, and it's called No Priors. And Noam is brilliant, and the engagement data on character is really special, right? So pricing is determined by market participants, and the broader response would be, I think that a vanishingly small number of AI companies can spend $100 million upfront well, and constraint is the name of the game in startups, right? It breeds discipline and creativity. But there the other side of it is, once companies there are AI companies with really extraordinary traction right now, and so I think we should recognize that.
I totally agree with you in terms of recognizing that. I would love your advice. I've met quite a few founders who say, bluntly, to build what we want to build, we need to raise much larger sums than traditionally were raised at pre-seed or seed rounds. And so we're raising 50 or 75 or even 100. Mm-hmm. Is that true that AI companies are much more capital intensive in the early days? If so, what is the spending on? Can you help me understand that, Sarah, genuinely?
Yeah, so we're meeting some of the same people that have this point of view, right? But I think very rarely is zero-shotting it, being I'm going to... So the thing that is really expensive, there are many things that can be expensive, but one of the things that is really expensive is I want to train a model from scratch that is very large, and it's going to take me... low tens of people, probably 20 or 30 people that know how to do this type of research, and 10,000 plus GPUs and X number of months. That is very expensive, right? My personal point of view is there's a less than 10 instances I can think of where that is going to make sense for companies. The vast majority of companies are going to figure out actually how to apply these models that other people have built that are offered by APIs or in the open source, or fine tune them, or build some other part of the stack. And so I've honestly seen a lot of smart founders begin with this premise, especially people who come from a research background, and then think through it and adjust course dramatically on how to sequence into understanding whether or not they even need that, right? Because I think a much bigger question than can you train a large model is does anybody want it? Right? Is it going to be useful? And you could answer some of those questions up front.
Can I ask, is your fund size big enough? When you look at some of the rounds going down, sorry, maybe that should be one for off record. But
ask, yeah.
If you have a $200 million fund and you're doing seed and AI, for diversification levels, you want 30 at seed. That's $5 million checks done. With fees, you're done. And that's $5 million check. And you don't have 200. How do you feel about that?
No, it's a $100 million fund. Okay, so I have lots of very smart investor friends ask this question all the time, and without arrogance, I could have raised $500 million. And I thought that doing this was, if I believe constraints breed discipline and creativity for founders, they also do for investors. And so like $100 million fund size is very focusing. Like we do early stage, we don't do growth, right? We are not going to do things that structurally don't make sense for the fund. And again, the vast majority of companies, like I think like we're working with really extraordinary people in the first handful of investments in the fund, and they're seed investments, right? They're seed and Series A investments, and we're putting $1 million to like $8 or $10 million to work. And we're going to be more concentrated than most seed funds, but I just think the bulk of the opportunity is in companies that can be much more capital efficient.
Yeah,
but I think the pressure to like raise bigger funds and like collect larger fees and do more things is real. It's just like doesn't matter, right? Like, will that generate returns? I don't think so.
You said there about like structurally not right for the fund. What is structurally not right for the fund in your eyes?
I think it is unlikely that if somebody wants to raise $100 or $200 million at $1 billion out of the gate, like that is hard for us to. It's hard for me to imagine that making an impact on the fund.
So I do brand checks. I'm very open. I've learned just to be more and more open with life. I invited a date once to an ice bath, and she thought I was a complete freak, but I thought it was better to be open with life. Don't do that. There's a limit to how, much yourself you should be. But my point being, like, it's actually impactful and important that you're in the biggest and the best names, especially as you establish a conviction brand. Do you not feel it would be worth it to put in the 100K check into that round so you could bluntly get the brand, which does resonate with community?
Yeah, I think we make investments in companies that we want to be a part of the journey for, but it's a very small set of companies. And like I think the real thing that drives brand in the long term is like A, returns, B, companies that matter, and C, like reputation with founders. And like I think we can do that generally by just playing like our game and being good at this. I'm willing to take that risk.
And D, podcasts, Sarah. D, podcasts.
Yes.
We both have one now. This is in both of our interests. We've spoken about kind of concerns within the fundraising market. In terms of opportunities, I love the show you did with Elad on No Prize. And you said the kind of one of the most exciting opportunities is in kind of tooling where the error rate doesn't lead to catastrophic effects in kind of whatever that is, workflow automation or whatever we want to choose. Where are the most obvious nascent low-hanging fruit, do you think, in terms of use cases that you're like, yes, perfect, this is great?
So one of my favorite investments so far has been a company called Harvey.ai, and the legal profession is a text in, text out profession, right? We can do a lot of the work that a first-year legal associate does end-to-end with these large models. And like, that's very valuable, right? So to me, I'm like, oh, this is a blindingly obvious company with really amazing founders. If you think about, so this is probably like a prototypical example, but there are so many opportunities that are very attractive, right? Code generation is obviously powerful, and like Copilot is not the end of it. We're just beginning to exploit that and democratize it. Copilot is just local context autocomplete, which is incredible on its own, right? RPA, big category of software, is going to be obviously reborn. We are actively interested in finding founders to back in like tooling for LLMs, retrieval, feedback. I think like this is a common, it's a very crowded space now, but we're excited about multimodal models for creative and marketing use cases. Like this is really expensive today, and people are going to get much better content. Like I'm sure you guys will start to use this stuff soon if you don't already.
Can I ask, do these co-founders, when they come from, say, accounting, when they come from legal, are they like steeped AI technologists, or are they former lawyers? Are they former accountants who are steeped in the domain knowledge? What's more important, like the technical deep knowledge there, or the domain knowledge of knowing accounting back to front, legals back to front? How do you think about that?
Like, so in the case of Harvey, like it's both, right? One founder worked at Google, DeepMind, and Facebook, right, in AI research. And one founder was a rising star lawyer at a white shoe law firm who like also hacks, right? And so I'd say, ideally, like you have some combination of like customer backed domain knowledge and understanding of like product and research. And so that is something that I think we can try to do, like help people pair up. I think over time, actually, we spent a lot of time with the research community, but I think the vast majority of companies, like software, is going to end up being built with love and respect, like run-of-the-mill product-oriented engineers, like special founders, but people who come from software engineering. And that's because this is going to become tooling like any other part of software, and the number of people who know how to leverage these models is growing, right? Which is great for you and me. Like we're going to see more interesting companies from people who are really customer oriented.
I totally get you. I think there was a stat that like currently 41% of code creation is done by artificial intelligence of some sort. Where do you think that will be in 5 years, Sarah?
I think we'll look at a different metric, right? So that's the like auto-complete stat of like, I know what's happening next, I'm typing, and like GitHub Copilot helps me finish the sentence, the function. But I think like you're going to get, human does planning. Like I, Harry, want a system that does X. And then it's going to be more iterative, right? Like I want a website 420 VC with this set of features. No, change it this way. Like I think we're going to get much more end-to-end stuff soon.
Can I ask, do you think you see kind of the complete unbundling then? I always think about everything going back to like core principles, and there's like bundling and unbundling. But like when you think about it like that, we'll just see that increasing personalization according to consumer needs, where actually a horizontal platform can't serve everyone, and it's just like these very micro serviced offerings for me, for you in different ways because you want something different, and actually it's so personalized that no big companies can actually tailor to such preferential options.
Do we all want different AIs?
Well, we want such different things that actually it's going to lead to the most extreme of unbundlings. Like neobanks led to unbundlings where it's like students and teenagers and then like contractors and then startups. And actually like AI has the ability to, as you said there, like I want to create a 20 VC website that also has like a podcast player in it, but also actually has a CRM for investors in it. And actually that is such a small demographic of people that would ever want that actually you lead to these kind of completely unbundled offerings. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, and I'd say like I think the technology is actually pretty general, right? And people may have preferences, but you can communicate. Like you tell that to a software engineer, and like they don't need to be specific to what you want. They just need to be able to build like a React app and a CRUD app. Right. And so like I think we're going to have AI systems that can do these things, and you'll just communicate your preferences maybe more naturally than like to a more generalist model than your average engineer today. That doesn't mean I think engineering as a profession goes away. I think they just like leverage these tools much better.
How do you think about the startup versus incumbent? I love Alex Rampell's quote, which is, the question is, will the incumbent acquire distribution before will the incumbent acquire innovation before the startup acquires distribution? I always think of that one. But it's the question of like who's best placed and what challenges to each face. How do you think about that when comparing startup versus incumbent?
Yeah, this is actually like maybe a very discouraging answer, but I believe in like intellectual honesty. Like classically, the only real advantage startups have is speed, right? And so I don't think this is that different than the traditional battles. I think that speed actually might matter more than ever when the environment seems to be moving at warp speed, right? Like what's the quote? Some decades nothing happens, and some years a decade happens, right? I feel like that is happening right now, and it's hard to make a large organization move at that speed. On the incumbent advantage side, there's a lot of much ado has been made about this idea of like a data moat. I'm sure you've heard this term, but honestly, there's a lot of data out there, and entrepreneurs are incredibly creative about collecting it and increasingly about generating it. And so I think it's fun to talk about the structural advantages, but I guess I'm still mostly looking for like really special founders and people who are like execution oriented with unique ideas. And I don't think it's like, oh, the incumbents are going to win this one or the startups are going to win this one.
When we look at the incumbent set, Microsoft are often hailed as kind of the one who's embraced it most tactically, strategically, and efficiently with their partnership with OpenAI and the investment there. Do you agree that they're the one who's navigated the transition best?
I mean, how could you not, right? I think Satya has done an amazing job Satya and Kevin Scott have done an amazing job championing, like really believing in this set of technologies, taking a bunch of bets, OpenAI and otherwise, using it as an opportunity to like try to leverage themselves into other markets that really matter, like search. We'll see what happens, but I think you'd be hard pressed to say that like Google or Amazon or Apple is like leading the field here.
Who do you think's in the worst place from their adoption stance?
I mean, these are all like incredibly structurally advantaged companies. I think that Amazon and Apple will have to make more investments over time in these technologies than like they don't have labs doing cutting edge work when like they have the scale to support them.
You said about kind of speed of execution there. I totally agree with you in terms of the importance of it. The thing that I also think though is like grossly misunderstood is the importance of the pick. I see great founders work on just shit ideas, and I don't mean that disparagingly, but it's like we know that restaurant analytics is not a good idea. Like, it's just not. And if it does work, it's going to be so much harder than anything else you brilliant entrepreneur could do. I want to talk about idea generation. How do you advise startup founders on choosing ideas when the world is moving, as you said, at warp speed faster than ever before?
I think that looking for ideas, I get like a lot of people ask me like, what ideas do you have? And I'm like, I'm happy to go on a tangent of like all the things that we think are really good markets to go after. But if you generically cast about for ideas, you're going to get a generic idea, right? It's not something that you like particularly understand. And so I believe in this idea of, and it applies more to B2B than consumer, right? But this idea of like having high resolution customer conversations. And so if it's solving a problem for yourself or just like really going and looking for problems instead, or even open research questions that you like think are attached to an interesting market. I'll give you an example. So the world is built on 3D models, from everything from entertainment to the physical world around us. It is an open research question as to whether or not you can generate 3D models that are usable in these use cases. But it's like, there's no market risk. It's highly valuable. It's just, can we do it? Right. So I think there's a bunch of different ways you can look for problems that become less generic, where you could come out of it and be like, I understand something as a founder. I have a hunch that like it's unlikely that every other person that wants to be an entrepreneur is going to have. And I think getting to that level of like depth of understanding and confidence, more founders would be better served by, as you said, spending more time picking and like feeling confidence in their depth of understanding before they like start going down the path preemptively. But it's uncomfortable, right? It's very scary to be in this like exploratory phase. And I think the real trigger for forward progress is like actual contact with customer, right? Not at the like, I have this high level idea. Like, is that interesting? If you're smart and charismatic, like, Harry, I like you. Yeah, that's interesting, right? That's very different from having a conversation like, do you have this problem? How do you rank this problem? This is my proposal. Can we follow up next week? And they're going to be like, I have shit to do next week, right? Like, this is actually not that important to me. I was just being nice to you, Harry. And like, you need that resolution of feedback to have confidence. Right.
I sent a founder an email the other day and I said, like, if you could, I would pay $50K a month for this. It was the video clip generation, like, which, by the way, I get so many. There's so many. My question to you is, like, we all say it's all about the founder. It's all about the founder. Sarah, honestly, I have turned down companies before because there is an amazing founder, but it's in ed tech, which just hell or high water, the churn is a complete bitch. And Duolingo is the leader, but it's still not a hugely valuable company, or whatever. You're selling to the NHS in the UK, which is a horrible market. For you, is it about founder or is it market? Or like, I'm asking the harder one here.
Yeah. I'm a founder first investor, right? And I
even
think,
if it's a really horrible market.
So the question is like, who's it? Like one of the great VC firms has this phrase, actually an individual, obviously, but it's great founder meets bad market, market wins. Right. And I think that's a very common point of view. The slight nuance I'd put on it is like, is there anything they could navigate to? And do they understand something that I don't that makes the market better? Right? Because these things are not static. They have their structural problems, right? If distribution is really hard and like it's a slow moving industry and it's got low margins, like that customer is hard to sell to, right? But if you have this idea about how to unlock distribution and it makes sense to me and you recognize all these problems of the industry and like you're just a force of nature that's going to break through, like maybe that will work anyway. And so I guess my view is you don't just turn away from all problems because like the space has traditionally been hard, but it should educate you as to like, does the founder recognize that and can they navigate out? Are they doing something to uniquely break through?
Sarah, I think we learn most from our like mistakes. My biggest mistake was investing in emerging markets. I looked at companies on paper and purely evaluated them on the paper business, and I didn't anticipate politics, weather, and a lot of things that actually can be very harmful to a company, but didn't factor into my model of the world. That was my lesson and my mistake. What was your biggest investing mistake, and how did it impact your mindset, do you think?
I mean, this is actually probably where one of the investments I regret not making, and there are, the anti-portfolio is pretty significant here, but one of the investments multiple investments I regret not making. So Benchling, Rippling at the A, right? Like these are investments you make because of the founder, right? Saji and Parker are like really special people. And I think like the recognition of collaboration in the life sciences has not traditionally been like an amazing SaaS market. It hasn't been much of a market at all. And so like, can you get confidence on something that's changing in the market? And like, can a founder change the market? Like, I believe this is possible now, right? With Parker, like transparently, there are risks around somebody who like built a company before, which ended controversially in terms of his path there. And like, I was, I think the world of Parker Conrad. I think he's an exceptional entrepreneur. And like my orientation toward like really pushing to take all sorts of risk if the founders are really special is, much stronger than it was 5 years ago.
Yeah, no, listen, I agree. I had Parker on, and he was not reserved in terms of the exit from Zenefits. So don't worry, that was a very graceful departure. No, I totally get you. I do have to ask, a lot of people, we spoke about kind of founder versus market, and Andy Radcliffe, I think it was, who said that, great founder, bad market. My question is, a lot of other investors oscillate on like defensibility, and I hear so many give the excuse of, I don't think it's very defensible. How do you feel about startup defensibility, Sarah? Let me dangle that one out.
Yeah, it doesn't exist, right? Like quite literally, you're starting with nothing. And so I think that it is I think investors are wrong to look for it. What you are investing in is trajectory, right? And the ability for founders to navigate a market and a thesis, right? And so you might believe that a team doesn't have a thesis on defensibility. You might believe that a team is incapable of coming up with a thesis on defensibility if, somebody is very early. You might, as an investor, not have one yourself yet, right? You're like, I just don't know how the market really turns out. But I think many of these cases, like these, how a market turns out is actually quite unknowable. And if you are looking for defensibility at the seed, like there's no company yet. This is a mistake.
I do want to ask, in terms of like the next generation of venture, we've got kind of two very bifurcated worlds, which is your multi-stage large firms and then your boutique smaller firms, often vertically focused. How do you think about the next 10 years of venture? Is one a cool winner? Does it stay as bifurcated as this? Does one move into another? How do you think about those kind of evolutionary trends?
Well, there has been, I guess, like this drift that you describe of scale of firm and then bifurcation. Structure and incentives determine strategy, right? So if you have a big multi-stage fund and big fees, there's more of an incentive to hire people and get coverage. And investing a few $1 billion or tens of billions of dollars at a time, with a few $1 million at a time, is not easy. You either do less work on the judgment and company building side, or you hire more people, or you invest more dollars at once. Like there's only so many vectors of attack, right? To me, fundamentally, I think it's like very hard for a $5 billion fund to have skin in the game on a $5 million investment, right? Versus think about investing 50 at a time.
How do you advise founders then when they, at the early stage, when they have a large multi-stage fund, and not naming names genuinely, but like a large multi-stage fund, and they have a smaller boutique firm, what do you advise them?
I advise them to get educated about how these firms work and what the incentives are, and then make a decision about the type of help they want at this stage in the company. And people are going to make different decisions, but thinking I think people should be both tactical and long-term oriented, right? The tactical is who's going to move the needle for me over the next 18 months, and then long-term oriented who do I trust and want to be around, and how should I sequence the base of supporters I have over the long term. And I don't there are real advantages to VC scale, right? I've experienced it. We know all of these people, coverage, reach, etc. But returns in most firms are dominated by a few good investors, even when the partner group might be 10 or more. And the complexity of interpersonal dynamics and decision-making in groups is not well understood by founders, right? And so I think there's real risk to good investment decision-making in big groups. Groupthink, seniority overriding, positioning in politics. And to be clear, again, not every firm, but it's sort of a structural risk that happens. When I don't know how to solve a problem, I tend to make it simpler. Smaller firm, fewer people, only do what matters. It's also much simpler for the founder to understand. And that's not, I think there's education to be done, either by investors, hopefully in an authentic and good faith way, or just by founders themselves, and to do references, right? I'm shocked that maybe 1 in 5 founders does investor references.
How can founders educate themselves, do you think? Because when you say about the politics and the interpersonal dynamics, we both know the game. We both know there's some really interesting interpersonal relationships within different funds. But we know that because we're steeped in this day in, day out. How do founders get educated? If you're listening to this going okay, I got a term sheet from 2 firms. How do I get educated, Sarah?
Talk to founders that work with those funds, right? So the simplest thing is to do references. I think the other thing is as soon as you have people who know the ecosystem, who are on your side at the early stage, you're so much better prepared. And so I think the real question is getting educated at the very beginning, right, with a seed or Series A, not trying to necessarily navigate it from first principles, but going and getting information from people who play in the ecosystem.
The final one before we do a quick fire, but I'm too interested. Hunter Walk said that we've seen kind of the death of the generalist seed VC. Do you think he's right in terms of saying that and being that binary, or do you think actually we'll still very much continue to see seed stage specialists that are horizontal and broad?
Yeah. So just for your listeners, Hunter's argument goes something like this. Tech is bigger, networks are too large to own, technical innovation matters more, hard to be a generalist, right? And so I think we're aligned with this and that we're absolutely focused on being the best possible partner to AI-enabled companies. But we are leaning into this as our advantage, but we've been talking about, it's a very execution oriented, very personal games. And there are many different ways to be good as an investor at an individual level. You have talked to thousands of investors now, many of which are great in different ways, right? And so when I think about some of my friends or the early stage investors that I really respect, some are more specialized. Eric Vishra is exceptionally good at enterprise infrastructure and tends not to do things he doesn't understand. That's great discipline. But others, Jim Getz has stretched from Palo Alto networks to WhatsApp, right? So empirically, there are different ways to be good at this, including more generalist ways, or even my friend Elad, right? I learned a lot from him, but he seems quite versant and to have good access across a broad range of technologies. And so I think, the claims I tend to be skeptical of conclusive statements about VC strategy. It's a dynamic market.
What have you learned from doing the podcast with Elad?
Wow, that like media is a business. Our original thought was like, oh, like we'll talk to our friends that are like doing interesting things in AI, and it'd be fun to do a low effort content project together. And like it has been fun, but like you would know, like one of the hardest working people I've ever met, but there's no such thing as anything that is like a high quality, low effort project, right? So like, duh.
Yeah, it doesn't exist. But you can do fewer, and the hard thing is actually in the beginning, you need to do more. This is what people forget. Like, we did 3 a week when we started. I mean, we do 3 a week now because I like the advertising revenue. But it's really important to get those numbers out in the beginning. I remember, Sarah, when we started, the importance of reviews. Like you really want to get reviews out because it will pump you up in the organic download charts, because it'll put you higher and higher in the rankings and you're noteworthy, featured. I remember going with 3 friends to a football stadium and having 500 Diet Coke cans strapped in like drinks rucksacks and saying, we'll give you a free Diet Coke if you'll give us your phone for a review. And we spent like 50p each, so like $250, and we got 500 reviews. We were like number 2 behind the BBC in the UK.
Amazing. Yeah. Oh my God, what a distribution hack.
I mean, I don't think anyone's ever done it again, and I wouldn't recommend anyone do it. It was brutal, but crucial. So yes, it is a business, but I love yours, and so it's awesome work there. I want to do a quick fire round. So we're going to start with, will we be in a better or a worse place by the end of 2023, Sarah?
Assuming you're talking about the macro, like it's, I think most of the pain is yet to come. We'll still be ugly.
Really? How so?
I think we're going to go through a digestion period of companies that raised it, like there was a multi-year experiment of the fat startup and companies overcapitalizing, and they still have that capital, but they don't have, like a lot of companies, they don't have the efficiency to like yet create a really like durable business. And so, I mean, this is very myopically focused on like tech startups and like how, worst place there. I think that will be gloomy for a while.
What trend do you see that others are not seeing, do you think?
It may not be very well understood that a significant part of the opportunity for AI is services, not software markets. Right. So as a software investor, traditionally, you're like, okay, here's the stack. Right. There's chips and cloud infra and developer tools and observability and security and applications, and then like all the consumer stuff. But I think it's a miss to be like, that's the opportunity for AI, because we're doing more work that is today labor. Right. And as you said, that opens like real questions in terms of, labor displacement, distribution of wealth. But that is the opportunity from a productivity perspective, too, like both enablement and like replacement.
Sorry, help me understand. What's the opportunity there for us as investors then?
It's easier with an explicit example, right? Yeah. The legal profession today is a services market. It's not a software market, right? Mm-hmm. And if we do some of the low-level work in legal services, it's a bigger pie than like software sold to legal firms today.
Yes, I totally agree. Okay, that makes total sense. Very nicely done with the analogy. I'm fascinated. How much did the domain name conviction.com cost?
Yeah, I'd say I have a good domain broker, and the fee base on a $100 million fund is minuscule, so not that much.
You can buy, in other words, long, one multi-stage firm. Which one do you buy and which one do you long?
I don't understand.
So sorry. You can buy one. That was my fault. This is the joys of being brilliantly sleep deprived.
Me too, man. Yeah.
And I don't have kids. What the fuck? I don't know how you do it. So you can buy one multi-stage firm and one seed firm. So one boutique and one multi. Which ones do you buy?
I mean, this is simple, right? You buy Sequoia as the big dog incumbent that's executed really well and has really impressive culture over time. And I don't need to buy a seed fund. I buy my fund.
You very strategically kept it all in the family. That was very, very political. Good. Well played, Sarah. You know what? I'm not going to push you. We're going to go for a short now. You can
I have too many friends in venture, Harry. You're
not getting out of it. You can get out of the buy or the short. You can't get out of both. When you short, multi-stage boutique, go.
I think that it will be a hard time for subscale seed stage funds without a differentiated strategy to persist. I think it was not hard to raise $10 to $50 million for a couple years, and it just will become more because LPs are going to become more careful given the turn in the cycle. Short on a multi-stage fund, I think early in growth investing is more different than it appears. And so I think there are firms that, tried the early stage investing route with a blanket based approach. And I don't know if that's going to turn out super well for Tiger.
Yep. No, I get it. Thank you. That was perfect. What are you
just made me an enemy, man. No,
don't worry. They don't listen. They hate podcasts and media and just life in general. What are you concerned by that others are not spending time on?
There are near-term abuses of AI that I think others are being thoughtful about, but I think we need to address...
What are near-term abuses of AI, Sarah?
Yeah, so if you can do code generation, you can do malicious code generation, right? And just other nation states and hackers are going to use every other tool out there. If they write code, they're going to write code with AI tooling today. And doing that at scale is dangerous, right? This is not that AGI safety is not important and interesting. It's just that there are today issues that are unaddressed. And I think people should I think we need to have more of a conversation around it and invest in defenses.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great answer. What did you believe in investing that you no longer believe?
I am more hopefully not in a sloppy way, but I am increasingly convinced that it's not knowable what the outcomes are for companies at the very beginning, and it's specifically how markets play out is unknowable because there are actors with agency determining how the market is structured. Right? So you or I could tell each other an intellectual narrative that holds together about why structural advantage in some specific market belongs to an incumbent or a startup or whatever. But it's just a convincing story, right? What really matters is the actors that are playing. And so I'm much more comfortable without knowing exactly how things are going to play out now or have been taught that.
So I think this is why reserves are complete bullshit. When you look at reserves, it basically rests on the assumption that you know which are the winners within an 18-month time period, which I don't think you do. If I were to bet on my winners, many of them have gone to losers very quickly. Many of the winners have been slow burners for a long time. You're very good friends with Dylan Field at Figma. Figma was not an obvious overnight success. Nowhere near.
No, it took 3 or 4 years to even show strong signal.
Yeah, exactly. Do you have reserves, and do you believe that actually reserves is efficient deployment of capital?
So part of being a really early stage fund is not really, right? We are going to invest in the early rounds of a company, and we're going to leave money on the table in the later rounds. And it's an explicit decision, but what it means, it's very focusing, right? We make the bets we make, then we're aligned with the entrepreneur, and we're not going to grow our ownership from there, but we're also not going to be distracted by this question of how do we be constantly underwriting our own portfolio? As you described, you're not you may be one of the only people who admit it, but no multi-stage firm is perfect at underwriting their own portfolio. It's surprising that they're not better, actually.
Tell me, what would you most like to change about the world of LPs? You navigated the LP market with conviction. I can start. I can say, like, I think GP commits are complete bullshit, and then most GPs actually then fund it through the fees, which then reduces their ability to invest in their own firms, but it ticks the box for LPs that, oh, they've got a 3% GP commit. Well done, I'm using your dollars now to fund my GP commit. It makes zero sense.
I am very lucky with my LP base, right? It's like very long-term oriented people and people I've known for a long time, and then like my founder CEO friends. So I'm grateful. But broadly, the LP landscape, it was educational. Like even though I've been talking to, my prior firm's LPs for a long time, it's still very educational to raise money. If you are a platform like a Greylock or Sequoia, like it's not a lot of raising happening.
Did you get exposure to LPs? Because most firms kind of shield you from it to prevent people leaving who are brilliant like you and then having a ready-made network. I know many who don't.
I think Greylock is a very small place, right? With a very tight relationship with its LPs. And so, very happy to get to know a really high quality group of people. But the LP landscape overall is very clubby, right? I'm sure you experience this. Much like venture, a lot of investors, they lack individual conviction. They simply follow bigger brands. And so more independent thinking would be good. I think it'd be, I think it's just it'd be good for the ecosystem.
I do agree with you there. Tell me, will Trump win the election?
I mean, I think he's as likely to be in prison, right?
Do you think so? Because I've had like so many people on the show recently. I'm British, so I'm sitting far, far away. But so many people on the show come on and say, I think Trump's going to come and win.
Yeah.
So who's next? Is Biden president again?
I don't know. I think you're probably right that I've been insufficiently pessimistic about this type of thing in the past. But just, facing criminal sentences now, right? So,
tell me, who's
I'm
your
sure this
favorite...
is really amusing for the Brits.
Relatively so, I have to admit. We did have a prime minister. We had 3 prime ministers in the space of 45 days, so I don't think we're one to throw stones.
I guess you guys had a dark but amusing situation as well.
We did, but we're past that now, and we have Rishi, so we're all fine. Who's your favorite angel to work with, Sarah, and why them?
It's been great to have a smaller fund and just be collaborative. I've been doing a bunch of work with Elad. I think he's a very independent thinker. It's something I value. His good taste. He's a positive sum person. I'm learning from him.
Final one. What does success look like for you with conviction? This was actually one that Pat suggested I ask you. 20 years out, what do you want people to say about conviction? What do you want to have achieved? I think about it a lot, and I'm intrigued to hear yours.
Yeah. Brutal. So this is a scary thing to say out loud because like with any entrepreneur, big goals are always arrogant sounding, right? But, with the fund, I think the first is it's a fund. The measure of performance is returns, right? And you can define that in different ways. But for me, I define it on a multiple basis, not an absolute dollar basis. Otherwise, I should have raised a larger fund. Let's put best in class venture multiples on the board, right? I think that's the first thing. I think the second, we started talking a little bit about relevance, right? It's possible to make money without being relevant. And we intend to do both, right? We want to be part of very important companies. So we have to pick well. My name's not on the door, right? I want to build a partnership. And so the question is can we build a very small partnership that, plays better as a team, makes better decisions, has better access as a team. Very simple to say, very hard to do. And I think the last is are we beloved by entrepreneurs? I think if those couple things are true and we're in, if we're beloved by a set of the most important entrepreneurs of the next generation, then I'll be happy, right? And if I'm not productive, my partners can kick me out and I can retire. Great.
Well,
there is a broader mission if you're technically curious, which is can we nudge use of AI in the world along, and can we nudge it to be productive and aligned and helpful? And I think we can.
I cannot believe it's been 6 years since our last show. I hope it's not 6 years since our next show that we do. I've loved having you on. Thank you for putting up with my prying questions. I was much less prying in the first show. I think you were like, what? What evolved? But you've been a star, so thank you so much.